And I quote, "I'll be there in a minute. Give me a second."
Time is relative, folks. Time is relative.
Yes. So, hey, cheers to everybody in the chat.
They're a division rival. I don't care how many wins they get. Screw them.
That wasn't the take I was expecting to hear.
I want to gush over watching live Chris Tanev.
I think that we completely underestimate the skill it takes to play defense.
One highlight or several highlights does not a Calder trophy make.
I'm stepping in here. I'm going to be the crotchety old man here. They need to learn patience. They need to understand the tension and everything and the drama.
How dare! Look at this! How is McDavid not getting a penalty?
You guys need to calm down with this, okay? You guys need to calm down with it.
It probably is, actually. I feel like we are now in a calm point as the off season has kind of the speed of the off season has all left. We're kind of in summer mode. No matter where you are right now around Western Canada, anyway, it is hot as hell. But we are here to talk Canucks hockey, recap the Canucks free agency and everything that happened. Welcome to the Shifts and Pucks podcast. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter at Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.Shifts and Pucks as well. And you can subscribe wherever you get your audio. Where we go to Calgary, and there is an event called the Calgary Stampede out there, Sean. Are people stampeding?
Giddy up.
Giddy up. Yahoo.
Yeah. Matthew Tkachuk's back in town. We're getting the Hawk-Tua girl.
Oh, wow.
Because means now get their own appearance at the Cowboy tent.
Yes. Yeah, I was out at the Wild Horse tent on Friday night. Unfortunately, that meant I missed the Canada Ecuador game, but awesome that we're in the semifinals. Who would have thought that Canada would have gone farther in the Copa America than Brazil,
or Mexico, or USA, or Canada, the pride of CONCACAF. And just to correct you, it was Venezuela, not Ecuador.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sorry, my bad.
Yeah,
but I still have my flag set up over there by the TV.
Nice. That voice you're hearing is Chris. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing well, Kevin. How about you?
I'm good. It's hot. It is currently 27 degrees when we're recording or posted for those that are listening later. But it feels like summer, and yeah. Kind of feels like everything in terms of hockey is kind of calming down. There's probably a few other things that will happen later on in the summer that will get all the insiders ruffled. But for the most part, everything has kind of got into it. And we'll get into what happened with the Canucks, who, just to recap everything in a succinct fashion, they lost Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov to Boston. Zadorov was 6 years, $5 million. Lindholm, 7 years, $7.5 million. They lost Ian Cole to Utah. They lost Casey DeSmith to Dallas. They got in Jake Debrusk and Danton Heinen from the Boston Bruins. Kiefer Sherwood, actually, let me correct that, Derek Forbort joined the Canucks, from Boston as well. Vincent Desharnais, former Oiler, joined. Kiefer Sherwood, former Predator, joined. And Yuri Patera, a former Vegas goalie, joined. And they ended up keeping Teddy Bluger, Tyler Myers, and Dakota Joshua. So the Canucks were very busy in free agency. They had a lot going in, a lot of decisions going into this. And there was a lot of speculation of who went, who, what, where went, and this is ultimately what happened. So let's start with the loss. I guess for me, I'll just start where I'm coming from. I think it would have been great to keep Nikita, both Lindholm and Zadorov, but you can't pay them the money that Boston paid them. Lindholm is probably going to be at best your third line center, and Nikita Zadorov is probably at best your 5-6 defenseman. So the contracts they got from Boston, the Canucks couldn't pay them. Is that fair?
Well, I think Lindholm was not going to be coming back to Vancouver, mostly because he wanted a bigger role, regardless of whatever the contract that the Canucks. I think the Canucks got close to whatever he got from Boston, but he just wanted a bigger role with Pettersson and Miller down the middle. He was never going to be a top 6 center for the Canucks. So he just wanted a bigger role, and that's totally fair. And he, in a way, he was lucky that he had such a good playoffs, because he had turned down big offers from both the Canucks and the Flames, and he still was able to get a long-term big money offer from Boston. So good for him. Zadorov was someone I feel like what I gathered again was similar. He wanted a bigger role. He didn't want to be the third pair defenseman. He didn't want to be just behind Hughes and Soucy on the left side. So regardless of what the Canucks offered him, I think he was, unless they offered him enough to stay that made sense, and they were offering him a role that made sense to what he was wanting, he wasn't going to stay. So yeah, it sucks to lose both those players. Both stepped up big time in the playoffs, but it's a cap system. You have to figure out where you can overpay and where you can't. And I would say the Canucks made the right decisions there, because despite the fact that both those players stepped up in the playoffs, you still have Carson Soucy, who plays a very similar game to Zadorov, minus the swagger and how Zadorov sort of just embraced the atmosphere of the moment of the playoffs. And as good as Lindholm was, it's just a luxury that they couldn't afford, going 3 deep, paying them $6 million plus, and then you add on the big Pettersson extension for this year as well. So yeah, I just don't. Both those players were just luxuries that the Canucks couldn't afford.
Yeah, I kind of want to look at it more in a instead of a coming in and going, I want to look at it more as a big picture thing, and kind of touching on what Sean just mentioned, like the fact that they had to give raises to Petey, to Joshua, and to Bluger, and then they also had to free up cap space by trading away Mikheyev and Lafferty, and they still decided to, instead of overpaying for someone like Zadorov, who was an instant fan favorite, they decided to go a little bit more strategic and go long-term on a fairly team-friendly bet on Debrusk. It's a more long-term than I think a lot of people were maybe wanting with Debrusk, but we were just talking about stepping up in the playoffs. Debrusk is a playoff performer. So the fact that the overall picture of what the Canucks have done this offseason, I feel like is they never were going to have a substantial like Nashville-like upgrade or an Edmonton-like upgrade as far as like just winning free agent frenzy by just getting the best scorers or offense. But I feel like they did the best overall, maintaining what they had while still trying to build and stay balanced.
And I think another big part of that puzzle, Chris, is the Philip Hronek extension as well.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Hronek too. Yeah,
I honestly forgot about the Mikheyev trade. So I completely forgot about that trade, and I forgot that they traded Sam Lafferty to Chicago for the contract rights, and he said, "Okay, thanks, I'm going to Buffalo now." So. Yeah, I totally.
But I would say Sherwood is a upgrade on Lafferty.
I look at I'm just looking at the Canucks forwards here, and I agree with you. I mean, the contract for Debrusk is probably too long, but ultimately you probably you still got a reasonable term. Like 5.5 for Debrusk isn't bad. Like, I don't think the contract is the amount of the contract isn't astronomical. The years are a little too long, but you're not like you weren't going to get Jake Gensel. He was kind of seemed to be set on a couple of different places. There was a couple of other players I was intrigued about. One of them was Victor Arvidsson. He ended up going to the Oilers. Do the Canucks pay what the Oilers pay for Arvidsson? I don't know. I'll get into Edmonton in a little bit. But ultimately, that's kind of like it's too long for Debrusk, but he's going to get 25. He's going to be a 20, 25, maybe 30 goal scorer. You got a guy in Danton Heinen who is a quiet 15, 20 goal scorer, and it definitely an upgrade for Mikheyev. And Kiefer Sherwood, don't sleep on this guy. He is a pain in the butt to play against. Quinn Hughes didn't want to. Apparently, Quinn Hughes asked Alvin and company to sign this guy because he was a pain in the ass to play against. So you do have a guy with a bit of a pain in the ass to play with. You have reunited the third line, and I think ultimately maybe the Jake Debrusk contract is too long, but the Dakota Joshua contract, in comparison to what other people were being paid, not bad. So, and then you've moved. So you still got. I like the Canucks forward group as constructed. Do I think it's better? No. Does it need to be better on July the 6th in plus 27 weather or July 7th in plus 27 weather? No. You have time to go get your luxury items at the trade deadline or during the regular season when that happens, and you kind of see where everybody is at. So in terms of the forwards, it's not bad. And, I think, look, I do think Lindholm and Zadorov are losses you just can't afford. They're luxuries you can't afford. Defensively, I still think they're pretty solid. You got Philip Hronek, who does need to bounce back and prove himself with this contract. You got the Norris Trophy winner and the best defenseman of the two between Vancouver and Edmonton. I think everybody can agree with that, right? I don't think I'm saying anything incredibly controversial. Those who think Evan Bouchard is better than Quinn Hughes, right? I'm making sense there, right? Okay.
You're preaching to the choir here. Yes.
You got a guy in Carson Soucy and Tyler Myers. I think Tyler Myers don't sleep on him. I think he's been quietly a lot more valuable for the Canucks than people realize. And Derek Forbort, who brings some size and toughness. Does he bring the same quotes as Zadorov? No. But there are times Zadorov can kind of fall asleep on you too. So, and you brought in a guy in Vincent Desharnais who will battle Noel Juleson for that 7th spot, but he's got some size and, Tocchet wanted size. So I think you look at this team, I think they're fine right now. They have an opportunity to learn the luxury items.
Yeah, and with the Debrusk contract, that's just the paying rate. You can complain about the term and all that all you want, but that's the paying rate now. If you're wanting a top end free agent, you're going to have to pay 6-7 years,
and that's why it's as low. That's why it's low of an AAV as it is because they gave him the term.
And if you're going to do that, might as well bet on a player who's going to be 34 at the end of the contract, not in their late 30s or 40s.
Toronto.
So, like I said, you can. I think we all would agree. Yeah, you would much rather have these contracts being a little bit shorter. But if that's the market and that's the paying rate, if you're not willing to change with the times, you're going to get left behind, and you're not going to sign players. You're going to end up missing out on free agents.
Also, we did the 1-year term last offseason, and look how much chaos that potentially caused Alvin this current offseason in having to re-sign them, or if he is going to re-sign them, and the fact that they had as good of a season as they did, give them all raises. and then that puts you into a bind as well.
Yeah, so I think it's just with the Debrusk contract, it's just the paying rate. If you're gonna it is what it is, but like I said, he's 27 right now. Like it doesn't for me like if you're gonna go long term on a player in unrestricted free agency, doing that with a 27-year-old versus someone in their 30s makes a lot of sense. So I'm not like I said, in a vacuum, in an ideal world, yes, you probably want it more in the 4 to 5 year range. But with the current market, I think it's a really good deal. And then
if that was in the 4 range, we probably would have been paying Jake closer to $7 million a season.
Yeah. So it's and he brings it. He's not a small player. He has a little bit of swagger to him, and they needed to bring in a winger to play on to add another option for Pettersson, because they had the Miller Besser pairing that they built a line around. Whether it turned out to be Pius Suter at the end of the season, and I wouldn't be surprised if that still is the same. And then you brought in Debrusk, so you're hoping that Debrusk and Petey can find some chemistry, and then you're probably going with either Danton Heinen or Niels Höglander on the other wing there, and you might have if Debrusk and Pettersson can get the chemistry. I think, Kev, you said he's a 20 to 25 goal scorer for Debrusk. I think he could push up in the 30s if the chemistry's there, and consistently in the 30s.
I'll still stick to 25 to be conservative. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I'll stick to 25.
Because he's gotten 27 in 2 of the past 3 seasons.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's like he got 19 last year, but he was also like it was a little bit different. But
wasn't he fighting an injury for a good chunk of the season?
He played 80 games, so but he put up 27 goals in 64 games the year before, 25 goals in 77 games in 21-22, and then you go back to the 18-19 season, he had 27 goals then as well. So like I think with the right line mates, he's definitely got 30 goal potential.
Yeah. I mean, just looking up, Jake was fighting a broken hand for most of the second half of the season.
So,
and it's not like the Boston Bruins had the Four Nations star at center there. I mean, they were running with Charlie Coyle and Pavel Zacha as your top 2 centers last year. So it is fair that people have a higher expectation of goals if he's playing with Pettersson. Although I could see him also playing a little bit with JT Miller as well. He has a bit of that swagger that you could put him on a JT Miller line. I mean, and but I guess that is. You cross that bridge.
I think that the whole point about bringing in Debrusk is if he's on that line with JT Miller, is he swapping with Besser? Because the whole point of bringing in Debrusk was to make sure that Petey has a more bona fide top 6 forward to play with.
Yeah, I think
really for a lot of the year.
You could make the argument that there might be a better natural fit with Debrusk and Miller. And if that is the case, then I think, you would almost have to have Besser in that second line spot then. Yeah,
I could see that. I mean, you're not reuniting a lot. But I mean, Pettersson and Besser have had chemistry before. They had it seemed to have gone away for some reason or another, but maybe it comes back. Like, you have options, right? So I think that's what Debrusk brings you. It gives you options, and then probably still need to find a right shot in to add to that forward mix, I think, because you're still looking at what Daily Faceoff is running with is Pettersson, Heinen, Debrusk. So I think you might want another right shot. I wonder if they give Kiefer Sherwood a little bit of a look in the preseason with Pettersson just to see what they have. Not expecting much, but you can experiment with some things, right? So, yeah. So
the thing with Sherwood is, like, I think we talked about the Canucks trying to find the next Dakota Joshua, and maybe they're. I think Sherwood's a good bet on that in terms of that, but you also don't want to put him into a position that he's not ready for. And Sherwood is a fourth liner, and maybe throughout the year he gets up there, but I don't necessarily see them putting Sherwood up there immediately. He has to work his way and earn his way up there, and that's not going to happen at least until sort of Christmas time.
Yeah, but I mean, they have things that they can experiment. Now, you could also, I mean, the other thing that's been talked about, and maybe what you do is you put Debrusk with Miller and Besser, and you throw up Joshua and Garland with Pettersson.
I don't like that.
Like, sure, that's stacking your top six, but then that also exposes your bottom six for defensive depth.
That's fair.
Well, it's just like depth wins. Like Florida was a deep team. Edmonton went on their run because they found depth. Depth wins.
Yeah.
You have two lines and that work right now with Suter, Miller, and Esser, and then you've got the third line, Garland, Bluger, and Joshua. I don't splitting those up, I don't think makes sense at this point. I think it's trying to work with the pieces you have to figure out what the best line mates are for Pettersson, and because if you do that, then you've got three lines that go.
And like Kev, I see what you're saying as far as experimentation of trying to figure out what new line combinations might work. And sure, they'll explore that in training camp in the preseason. But I'm fairly confident that once they get to the regular season, Sean will probably be more closer to correct in the sense that first line and the third line will stay similar.
My point is if there are injuries or if there is something that happens and just something doesn't work, the opportunity to tinker and adjust to things just in case probably is it's valuable to have it, right?
I feel like the guys that they picked up are fairly versatile in that way that you can use them as Swiss Army knives up and down the lineup, especially the Denton Heinens for sure. I feel like Denton Heinen is kind of like the next Pius Suter, and I feel like Sherwood is the next Dakota Joshua in those sort of in that sense. So like, I feel like the guys that they brought in kind of fit that Tocchet mold. And even though they might not have been like the best headline, attention grabbing, the Canucks have improved or what have you, I feel overall that because they are going to probably fit well within the group because of the style that they play already, I feel like it probably is going to work to the team's benefit.
Yeah. Now, and I'd also say that if they're going to break up any of the lines here, sorry, Kev, I wouldn't be surprised if Suter goes back to the and you have Heinen as an option on the left wing on the Miller's line as well. I think that's actually more. I think that's more likely than Heinen on Petey's wing, because. Are we forgetting about Niels Höglander? Well, the guy scored 20 even strength goals this past season, and people are already writing him off out of the top six.
I'm not writing him off the top six because I mean I think you play him with Pettersson, but I think it would be nice if you're going to go out and buy a luxury item, another right hand shot would be great on that top six. And it doesn't necessarily mean you move Mo Höglander off the top six. I think it would be actually more likely you keep Höglander in the top six and take Heinen to the bottom on your bottom six. But it would be just a nice to have.
And if we're talking about like lineup construction, at least what I have in my notes for my perspective roster, I have Heinen on the top line. I have Hoagie and Debrusk on the second line with Petey. I have Suter in between Joshua and Garland. And then I have Bluger between Pod, Colson, and Sherwood.
I might flip that to start with and put Bluger, Joshua, Garland, and then Suter, Pod, Colson, and Gang. And don't forget,
just based off of chemistry, I hear that for sure. But at least my rationale for having it that way is it was the strongest four centers in the order of their strength, I think.
Yeah.
And Suter had good chemistry with Joshua and Garland to start last season as well. Don't forget that.
Yeah, that's true. Now on July 1st, it was Canada Day, and I think everyone got a little excited about what the Oilers ended up doing. They brought in Victor Arvidsson, they brought in Jeff Skinner, they were able to keep Adam Henrique. They kept Matthias Janmark, they kept Corey Perry. And
you can argue that that's a curse and not a blessing, but okay.
Yeah. Yeah. In thinking about this, I like I was one of the people that thought the Canucks should have made a run at would have liked to see the Canucks go get Janmark. Didn't happen. That's okay. They're one win. The others are one win away from a cup. That's completely fine. All of that sort of stuff. I think that, just thinking about this 6 days later, I think that there was a lot of shocking on social media that there would be an overreaction to things happening. But I don't think the Oilers are as dynamic as people are giving them credit for. I honestly still would give the bottom six if we're going to a matchup here between the Canucks and the Oilers, and we'll get to Vegas in a second because they are in there. I still think the Canucks are better on the bottom six. I still think the Canucks are in. I have the better blue line, but especially the bottom group compared to the Oilers. And I still look, depending on where Thatcher Demko is at, the Canucks I still think would give the Canucks the edge in goal. I mean, the area that the Oilers are heavier at is at the top six because they have a guy named McDavid and a guy named Draisaitl.
Yeah, I don't think much has changed as far as the Oilers' strengths. Their strength is their top six. Their bottom six, I'd say that they improved, especially that third line. But overall, their weaknesses are still their weaknesses. Their defense after their top pairing is average. And Skinner, I will admit, impressed me the deeper that they got through the playoffs. But I wouldn't put him on Demko's level.
Yeah, adding Jeff Skinner is great, but he's a smaller forward, just like but I think the Arvidsson signing is is a good one. And then Evander Kane is a big question mark on that lineup. So, and then it's just they lost Desharnais, replaced him with Josh Brown, and they've got Kulak, and then they're hoping Broberg takes a step here. If Broberg takes a step, that really helps them solidify that blue line, but he's got to do it first. And when Skinner's on, he's good, but he's very inconsistent. So,
I guess for the Demko part, it sounded like, according to Patrick Alvin at the end of free agency press conference, he used the word rehab. It sounds like he'll be ready for the start of the year. They did bring a third goalie in. I think that will be one of the questions going into next year is how much. I don't know did they overplay Demko?
I think it's just they had no, I don't think. I think there's just a couple unlucky injuries, especially the second one. Like, it was game one of the playoffs, and he gets injured.
Yeah.
So I think I don't think he was overplayed, but if Seelovs can come in and spell him off, and they can go closer to like a 50-30 split, I think that would really help keep Demko fresh for the playoffs. And the other thing is I think we were parsing words. I think we as like Canucks fans, the media as a whole, we're based off of reports from the Canucks were looking for a veteran goaltender. They talked with the Smith and everything. I think we were looking too much into what the Canucks were doing and trying to galaxy brain it into what does this mean for how Demko's doing. I think his rehabilitation after his injury has probably gone about on schedule as you can get. But the Canucks knew that they needed to make sure that they were 3 deep. Yeah, Tolopilo is good, but he's still young. And you don't want to rush a goalie up too early. So getting someone like getting an option who can a goalie who can be the number 3 goalie that can come up or at least even push Seelovs for the backup. There's nothing wrong with that. That's all that they were doing. I don't think it's necessarily means anything other than that's what. Yeah, I think it's just them doing a good work because they needed another goal. They needed another goalie in the system because they lost Shawchenko. And Smith was not going to come back on a contract that was going to be cap friendly for the Canucks because they needed to make sure that whoever they brought in as a goaltender was making less than the 1.1 million that you can send down to the minors and not have a cap hit on the main roster for.
And I think Patrick Allvin was fairly smart in the sense of being somewhat frugal with his spending this offseason, where they still have some cap space, but they still have a fairly full roster by the first week of July. So they have got basically the full roster that they can send to training camp, but they also have that flexibility of, let's say, a Lekara-Maki pushes Podkolzin out of the lineup. They have the ability to be able to accommodate that.
Yeah.
Or pull up any other example that you want, but that was just the one that came to the top of my head.
Yeah, they've got options in the bottom 6 and spots available for the younger players to grab if they have a good offseason and come into training camp and win it. And it's not, and the players that they're going to go down aren't going to hamper the Canucks on the cap. So, yeah, I think what Allvin did was smart.
Yeah, well, he's a smart. Yeah, they're 2 of the 3 off seasons. I mean, the first one probably I think Allvin was getting his feet wet. They've been pretty frugal and overall pretty smart about what they're building here anyway.
And he was also handed a shit sandwich that first year.
Yes, he was right. Yeah. So that I think. Yeah, in terms of that, where is Vegas? Like, we know where Vegas is, and of course they're in Nevada. Well, where does Vegas fit in this conversation?
I think all 3 of those top teams, depending on how they get out of the starting blocks can be part of the conversation to win the Pacific next year.
Well, Vegas is big lot. Well, Vegas lost a lot of veterans, but they do have some guys in that system that I think can break out. I think Pavel Dorofeev will be a guy that I think to pay attention to. They acquired a rumored flame Alexander Holtz in a trade during the draft. That might be an interesting pickup for them. They did lose Jonathan Marchessault, but I think, that's I think Vegas felt that they probably needed to get younger. And look, I think I'm not sure. I don't have them at the level of Edmonton and Vancouver yet. They certainly kind of stumbled their way. They kind of stumbled their way into the playoffs. They had a 2-0 lead against Dallas. I mean, that was going 7 anyway, and they ended up losing. And they didn't win a game at home, by the way, against Dallas. I still would put them in third, but they're also the team that can, they're going to get a full season of Tomas Hertl. They're going to get a full season of Noah Hannafin. They're going to probably find like this big fish that they always find that nobody is paying attention to, because that's the Vegas way. So I have them third at this point, but again, it's early July. They'll find a big fish. They will. That's the
Their depth down the middle and their defense is up there with anyone.
Yeah.
You've got Eichel, Hertl, Carlson, and Nick Waugh down the middle. And you mentioned Alexander Holtz as a player that I think is going to thrive with the Devils.
I'm looking forward to Flames Twitter complaining.
Good. They picked up Victor Olofsson as well, who I think will be a very good sneaky ad for them. And then that blue line, like you get Hannafin, Pietrangelo, Shea Theodore has become underrated. And then you've got Nick Hague and Zach Whitecloud on the bottom pair, along with Braden McNabb. Like, it's just that six is tough to beat as well. Like, and Aiden, they lost Logan Thompson, but they've got Aiden Hill and
Ilya Samsonov.
Yeah,
Ilya Samsonov as their two goalies. Like, there's no glaring hole there, in my opinion. And if they get Jack Eichel, Mark Stone healthy, Tomas Hertl healthy, like, they've got the stars as well. Also, people are sleeping on Vegas.
And their third goalie is still NHL-ish caliber in Schmid that they got from New Jersey with that Holtz deal.
That's right. Yeah. So you look at, it's just, I think people are just sleeping on them. I think it's just, they didn't make any big, sexy moves like Edmonton getting Jeff Skinner. But the players they did get, I think, add to the roster, and they're always going to be a tough team to play against. So that's why I said it's like comes down to who has the better start to the season. Out of those three, we'll have the inside track for the.
It definitely has the least Vegas-y feeling off season so far in their history. I'll agree to that. But kind of to Sean's point is they still kind of made sneaky good quality moves in the sense that I don't think that they devalued their roster. Like, sure, they had a bunch of bigger names walk away from the team, but overall, I feel like their overall construction on their roster is still going to be fighting for in that top tier in the Pacific.
Well, their glaring hole is their health. That's their glaring hole. They've battled injuries, and look, Mark Stone is controversial. But the man had a ruptured spleen, and just Google what a ruptured spleen is. It's not something you can just take time off for. I mean, it's convenient and all of that, whatever. But I mean, Jack Eichel last year had injuries as well. Alex Pietrangelo had injured. Like, they had a lot of injuries last year too. So their glaring hole is their health. That's the biggest weakness for Vegas. But they also believe that if they just get in, they have a shot. Right? That's the Vegas way. So anyway, I think the other interesting story. The other thing just that was a little under the radar that I wanted to point out, I think I interrupted someone here, but it sounded like I read somewhere, I don't know if this has become pretty common knowledge, but it sounded like Connor McDavid needed off-season surgery. I swear I read he needed abdominal surgery. So, I mean, will he be ready at the start of the year? Who knows? Do the Oilers need him at the start of the year? I mean, they got off to a horrendous start and got to the Stanley Cup final, so they're probably like, okay, we can go without you until you become proper McDavid. But I think that might be another under the radar story with the Pacific Division.
I'm just looking up. There's a headline from June 28th from Ryan Rashog saying Connor McDavid will not require any offseason surgery.
Oh, he didn't. Okay, sorry. Okay, I would believe Ryan. So, okay, I stand corrected. Anyway.
Yeah, well, again, but yeah, that's the whole thing. When you go through a big run like that, especially with like the Oilers did, because they were basically playing for their they were playing for their lives from like, was it December on, when they were absolutely near dead last in the league.
Basically, once they made the coaching change. After that, they were basically on fire. Yeah. To make up for that shitty 2-month start.
Yeah. So it's that's where I'm at. I'm just like, I look at it, and the Canucks got off to an absolute torrid start and rode the wave to the end, and Edmonton was able to catch Vegas, but the difference between all three teams, I think, wasn't that big last year, and it's not. I don't think it's going to be any bigger and much different this year.
Yeah, with the general parity in the league, it really comes down to luck. Whether one team gets on a hot streak, whether one team gets riddled with injuries, like, it really just comes down to luck. You can prepare for the best, but you also have to anticipate the worst and just ride the wave that you're given.
In a lot of ways, that's true. Yep. And I guess let's quickly just touch on some of the other news that hit the Canucks. Quinn Hughes wins the Norris. No surprise. He won it by a pretty large margin. Probably no surprise. He was also named one of the first 6 players named to the Four Nations Cup. So for the U.S. team, along with Adam Fox, Charlie McAvoy. I'm assuming Jacob Slavin is going to be on the team. Matthew Tkachuk, Austin Matthews, and Jack Eichel as part of your U.S. By the way, Canada was McDavid, Crosby, McKinnon, Marchand,
Braden Point.
And Braden Point, yes. So that, and they did also keep a couple of minor league players for their Abbotsford Canucks, including Jet Wu, who, his start was rough because the former coach of the Abbotsford team wanted to try Jet Wu as a forward and Jet Wu as a defenseman. So I think he's going to continue to develop. And Chase Waters was also signed. So they also did some minor league work as well. Let's not forget, you do need to have that depth, and the minor league team is important to make sure that you have with players as well. So lots of work. The Canucks did a lot of work.
They made the coaching change.
Yes.
Manny Malone.
They did the coaching change with Matt.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, so Matt Holter coming in. The Colton's now with New Jersey as an associate coach, but bringing Mel Holtra back into the fold, I think is fantastic. Colton did a really good job with the Abbotsford Canucks last year and the year before, honestly. But if you're going to replace Colton with anyone, I think Manny Malhotra is just such a great option, and seeing him back home in as part of the Canucks organization is absolutely fantastic.
Yep. And his son will be playing with the Chilliwack Eagles of the BCHL. That was part of the reason why Manny wanted to come here, because his son will be playing down the road. Let me get his name So I think that was an added benefit to that conversation too. So if you're going to be watching the BCHL, Caleb will be joining the Chilliwack Eagles He was a number 8 pick or the Chilliwack Chiefs, but not the Eagles. He was an number 8 pick in the OHL draft by the Kingston Frontenacs. So that was that's added to why Manny Malhotra was able to join the Abbotsford Canucks to be close to his
And
family.
while we're talking about the Abbey Canucks, there actually was a couple of, if you pay attention to the Abbey Canucks, a couple notable names that left the team as well. Sheldon Dries, I think, is in the Eastern Conference somewhere. I can't remember which team. And Alex Canuck Liepert is now part of the Condors.
Oh, right. Yes. All right. Yeah. So lots happened with the Canucks there. So anything else we need to touch on the Canucks part?
No.
I think we're pretty good.
All right. Let's for the time here, I guess let's talk about free agency. There was a lot that happened. Of course, Sean was referring to a potential Toronto Maple Leaf being 42 years old when they're being paid, although we do love Chris Tanev. But I guess maybe I'll just toss this out. The biggest splash was Nashville. Did Nashville win free agency or just make the biggest splash?
I'd say they won it. Like when you're adding Brady Shea, Jonathan Marchessault, and Steven Stamkos to your team, you're basically adding – well, yeah, 2 top 6 forwards and a top 4 defensemen. That's tough. That's tough to beat, no matter what other teams do.
Like the thing that they majorly lacked in the series against the Canucks was that finishing touch, and they definitely made up for that in free agent frenzy. That being said, did they potentially make a long-term gamble on some of their ages on the guys that they picked up? Sure, but at least in the short term, they fixed their holes in their roster.
And they ended up having to trade away Ryan McDonough back to Tampa earlier on in the offseason. So replacing him with Brady Shea is a nice move by them as well.
Yeah. That was it. And of course, they also signed UC Saros to an 8-year extension, which means the unmade bed. Askarov is not happy, so that might be a trade chip down the road that they look at, or that might be an interesting situation that happens down the road. Was there anyone else that kind of impressed you in free agency or the off season? I have a couple of names. I'm kind of curious who.
I mean, you could make it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
You look at what they did. They picked up Brett Pesce, Brendan Dillon. That blue line now looks really good. And then they've got Sheldon Keefe as head coach there now.
Markstrom and Jake Allen as their goalies. Like that's a notable increase as far as quality compared to last season for the Devils.
Yeah. They're a team I think they got pissed off that they missed the playoffs last year, and they're going to bounce back because not only do they add those players, they have a bunch of pissed off players like Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier that are going to want to prove that last year was a fluke.
Yeah. Chris, what were you going to say?
I was going to say you could probably make an argument that Tampa had a fairly good start to the offseason. Obviously, it's interesting as far as like it seems like the general trend for general managers nowadays is to be a lot more shrewd. But to me, the fact that Stamkos, their longtime captain, who scored 40 goals for them this past season, and to insult him with a $3.5 million AAV offer, and then to basically let him walk, and then to go give the big money to Gensel, I thought was a little interesting. But overall, I feel like as far as the roster construction, you could probably say that Tampa had a decent upgrade this offseason.
Well, yeah, Jake Gensel is an elite winger that it's hard to pass that guy up. I mean, I guess it's going to be very interesting to see what Steven Stamkos does. And, Tampa's always found a way to find some of those guys too, but they decided to extend Victor Hedman. I think a bigger loss than a lot of people realize is that McMail-Sergachev trade. I think I don't know if that might have Tampa take a step back for me. Like I think JJ Moser is a good player. Is he as good as Sergachev? There's a guy on this podcast that thought Sergachev was better than Victor Hedman. He's a brother of someone that is currently on this podcast right now. So I actually think
Sergachev had a really good season, not this past one, but the season before. Hedman's season this past year was way better than Sergachev's.
Yeah, and Sergachev had a broken leg he broke a leg, didn't he? This year too. He was injured for a good chunk of the season.
Yeah.
I mean, Utah definitely upgraded their blue line with Sergachev and John Marino without question, and made Flames fans cry by drafting Tijik Inla.
The best troll job of the draft for sure.
You know what? There was a rumor out there, and I'm trying not to pay attention to a lot of these rumors, but tell me this wouldn't have been a massive. Mitch Marner goes to Utah for the first pick, and Toronto takes Tijik with Brad Treliving, walks up to the podium and selects Tijik Inla.
That's devious.
I would have applauded Brad Treliving for doing that. That would have been that's you do that. That's a massive. But
you do that, and Brad, anytime Toronto comes to Calgary, would hear "fuck you, Brad" chants.
Yep. But Utah, I think Utah is a team that did a good job with the not necessarily in UFA, but the trades that they made at the draft, getting Sergachev and Marino. So I think they have a top pair now, and that's something they didn't really have before. Like you look at all the top teams, they've got a top pair that they can rely on all situations, and minute munching that can also put up points. They didn't have that. They didn't have that one of the biggest glaring holes, and now they have it, and they've got depth. Like Sean Durzee's now a second pair defenseman. That's really good for them.
Yeah, and they brought in a veteran in Ian Cole that can provide some experience. So yeah, I thought they did really well.
Does Ian Cole's streak of always being in the playoffs come to an end this year?
Could. It's going to be tough for Utah to take that jump. So
it's definitely his biggest gamble as far as keeping that streak going, because he's been team hopping the past several seasons.
I'm pretty sure people would have said that about the Canucks last year, though.
Yeah. Fair, but I'm not convinced that Utah can get out of the Central.
Well, there's three. I mean, Nashville, obviously. Let's not forget Dallas is still going to be there. Colorado is still going to be there.
If you put that up against the three in the Pacific, I'm not sure Utah sneaks in.
Yeah, it's going to be. There's still. I still think they're probably a couple years away from. And I mean, people are going to go to the game and not actually be able to see the game according to with the structure of this arena anyway. So they're building. Unfortunately, the legacy of the Arizona franchise continues with, they're going to have to grow themselves into the playoffs. One other team I think that did really well, mostly because of the draft, be very wary of them in the next. I don't think they make the playoffs next year. I don't think that they compete for the playoffs necessarily in competition for they might make a competition for the playoffs, but look out for the Montreal Canadiens. They may have gotten the steal of the draft in Demidov, who I was listening to Montreal Canadian podcast. This is the most skilled guy they have drafted since Guy Lafleur. they are very excited that Demidov landed to them at 5. And
if we're talking about the draft in Montreal, can we just say, good job, bring out Celine? And in that same breath, I will also say props to Philly for bringing out Buffer and him leaning into the full shtick of doing the introductions. That was excellent.
Yeah. Yep, that was good. Yeah, but watch out for in a couple of years. I think Ottawa better get in the playoffs here soon because Montreal and Ottawa and Buffalo, you better figure out to get your way into the playoffs because Montreal is going to pass you quite quickly here. That's a very talented team.
Yeah, but talent doesn't win. Like all the time, we've seen it so many times have rebuilt based off of just pure puck skills, and they haven't been able to do anything. Ottawa's one, Buffalo's another. So they have to figure it out. They have to figure out the other things as well.
Which leads us to. I mean, I guess before we talk about this Buffalo Edmonton trade, is there anyone that you felt took a step back?
I feel like LA is kind of, if they aren't just treading water, they may have gotten closer to the neckline as far as the playoff cutoff and being playoff quality.
Yeah, I think they're hoping that the addition by subtraction of Pierre-Luc Dubois not on their team helps them. I mean, I think one of the more mysterious contracts was giving Joel Bouchard 4 years, but and Darcy Kemper is in bounce back mode. I'm confused by what Washington did. I know that everybody is all excited about their moves. I just wasn't. I'm not sold on what Washington did. I'm not convinced that they're quite there yet, but I understand why they did it because they're keeping Ovechkin happy. But
to me, yeah, they're the biggest wild card. Like, until we see how they perform together as a team, I'm not sure what I really want to say about Washington, other than the fact that I think they definitely took some gambles. But if it pays off, it could pay off well for them.
Yep, sure.
The other team I've got questions on is Carolina.
Yeah.
Not being able to get Gensel, losing Brett Pesce.
Brady Shea.
And Brady Shea. Like they lost a lot on that blue line. They replaced him with Sean Walker and brought back Shane Gostisbehere here. But I just don't know.
Chatfield.
And Chatfield, but like even up front, like they continue to not really have that that true game breaker. Whether Aho, Svechnikov, they've got players who could be it, but they haven't taken that true superstar level step up front. And losing Gensel really hurt them in that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the other team that made me scratch my head was Detroit. You traded Jake Wallman. You brought back Patrick Kane. The Yzer plan, I'm not sure what the Yzer plan is doing. Anyway, that was the other team that I felt I was a bit confused by.
Yeah, and I don't think you're alone in that, Kev. I feel like a lot of people are like, Yzerman got so much praise with what he did in Tampa, and then everyone thought that, okay, he's going to go back home to Detroit and repeat that again. And there's been a fair amount of head-scratching moves that he's made that haven't exactly paid off in the same way that they did in Tampa. So, yeah, you're not alone in the sense of questioning the Yzer plan at this point.
Yeah, and then the other team that got a lot of questions this week was the Buffalo Sabres. And, of course, they made the trade with the Oilers. They traded the 9th pick in the 2022 draft and Matthew Savoy, who is from Sherwood Park. They traded him to Edmonton for Ryan McLeod and Tony Tullio, who was a 5th-round pick, and I believe in the same draft. I'll have to look that up. a lot of people were panning this trade, and I kind of have to be honest, I scratched my head a little bit with it for where the Sabres were coming from, and then I had a look at their lineup. They don't really have a lot of speed in their bottom six. And Sean, you talked about having that team. They drafted a lot of the very similar type of Savoy skill guys. Noah Odlin, Yuri Kelich. You can go down that list. Victor Olofsson is a former Sabre. You talked about Victor Olofsson in Vegas. He's another guy that was a skilled guy that Buffalo drafted. They don't have a lot of that other aspect of them. So I kind of understood why they acquired Ryan McLeod. I guess giving up a Matthew Savoy for me is a little much, but I also at the same time kind of understand why they did it. I don't think that this trade was as bad for Buffalo and the steal that Edmonton ended people thought. I mean, I think Savoy is a really talented guy, and he's going to in a place where, you know, he could probably he's probably going to score a lot of goals, but the Sabres need to figure out that one of the things that the Sabres need to do is figure out the bottom six, or they're not going to compete in the playoffs. And they brought in Sam Lafferty, as I mentioned, Ryan McLeod. I don't think that this is as bad of a trade for Buffalo as people are making it out to be.
Where does, in terms of Savoy, what's his ceiling? Is he a second line player?
I think it's a good question, actually. I think he probably will be, probably a six. He's an offensive player. So he's a skilled guy. He's not going to be a guy that you're going to want to play in the bottom six. I don't think his defense is quite there. It's going to have to be something that he works on in order to be a guy that you end up playing in the bottom six more often. I mean, but I guess from the Oilers' perspective, they have time to get that figured out because he doesn't have to be part of their lineup right away. But is he a franchise guy? No, he's not. Is he a guy that can bring you some offensive skill? Yes. Do the Sabres have enough of that? Yes. They need some other stuff.
And then with Ryan McLeod, like he's 24 years old, so he's still young. And he still has room to grow into he's already a third line player in the NHL, and he's got room to grow. Like, I can understand, yes, the shock value of trading a former 9th overall pick, but we're a Canucks podcast. When was Vasily Podkolzin drafted? 10th. What's he done?
Not a whole lot.
Exactly. We want him to, but nothing yet. And yes, Savoy's junior stats are fantastic, but they're junior stats. And we've also seen many a player put up points in junior and not be able to make that next step into the NHL. So they've moved on from, so they have, as you said, Kevin, they've got a lot of similar offensive players in this system in Buffalo. And they decided to trade Savoy. Makes me wonder why him.
Yeah, I wonder, but part of me wonders if this is a similar to a couple of other situations that have come up where the player feels like he should be playing more, or he should be in the NHL a lot quicker than the team does. I'm not saying that is. I mean, but we saw that with Rutger McGorty, and we saw that with Cutter Gauthier as well. I wonder if that's part of it. But I don't. I mean, I guess we'll find out with Matthew Savoy. I don't really know the whole. I can't say that whole situation. So I mean, I have no idea. But don't sleep on Tyler.
He's also the other thing with Matthew Savoy is he's only 5'9".
Yeah, that's why that was like, he's got to be a top six guy to be in the NHL. Like, he's not, and I'm not trying to be sizist, but that's just the way that it is, right? He's an offensive guy who he's a scorer. He's not going to fit in your bottom six. It's not his game.
No.
And because you briefly brought him up, I don't know if it was just the fact that maybe like 32 Thoughts kind of overhyped the possibility of it, but like with the whole Rutger McGorty drama, I was expecting that was going to be like a draft day drama sort of headline, but nothing has happened regarding him, and Winnipeg kind of had an underwhelming free agent frenzy as well.
I mean, that's just Winnipeg anyways.
Yeah, as Dan has said on Fireside Chat, they don't have an airport. It's hard to sell people on Winnipeg. But they made a couple of later moves that may work out for them. But and listening to some Winnipeg podcasts, it sounds like the problem here isn't the Jets. It might be this player himself that is the problem, and sort of from what I heard in a couple of Jets podcasts, it's the McGroarty camp that is making a bigger deal out of this than the Jets are.
So is this a kind of Pierre-Luc Dubois 2.0 type situation then? Obviously, like different arc in the player's career, but just similar in like how the player and their agent is handling it.
I would say this is more of a Cutter Gauthier 2.0 in terms of this is a guy that thinks that he should be in the NHL a lot sooner than the team does. And I think that the Jets are very much one of those teams that want to marinate their players with the Manitoba Moose before they put play on them. And he has this expectation that he should be in the NHL now based on what he's done in Michigan. And he's just in for, I think the Jets are just, look, we don't feel you're ready yet. Like you're a good player, but you need some work.
Yeah, so, it's tough for Winnipeg because they already have a tough time bringing in free agents. They already have players who have wanted out because of it. And now they've got a prospect who they can't even get in the door. So.
Yeah, it is tough. It is tough, but I totally don't. I mean, at the same time, you can't panic. We can't get free agents in the door. We got to play this guy. You can't do that either. It's a really delicate balance.
No. Yeah, it's definitely, that's why it's such a tough spot for them. And I think part of it was if they were in the playoffs. They were in a playoff chase and going through that run. And you're not going to bring in a rookie to play those minutes very often. Like there's one or two instances that you can come up with that are, and those players were are generational players.
Yeah.
And I feel like Winnipeg's fairly deep when it comes to their forward roster. So Rutger trying to crack that lineup is going to be difficult. It would be a lot easier if it was a defenseman in their prospect pool making this stink, because right now that's probably where they're their weakest is in defense.
Yeah, I would agree on that. They got their prospect pool is full of pretty solid forwards. Their defense, not quite. And I mean,
and their NHL roster of forwards is already fairly strong too.
Yeah. Yeah,
I feel like they actually made out pretty damn good out of that PLD trade.
Oh yes, I totally agree. I thought it was a great trade at the time, and I still do.
And especially with how PLD played out in LA, they handily won that trade.
The only thing that I would say to that though is hopefully Gabe Vilardi is healthy, because that has been he wasn't healthy. He's been hurt the last couple of seasons. So if he's healthy, then it's a slam dunk home run. But right now I would call it a double win.
Fair.
Yeah. Is there anything else we need to talk about?
I think
we're good for right now. Yeah.
All right. Well, we will be back at some time.
it's the off season. Yeah.
It's the off season. So, it is summer. We're going to be outside and all of that. But thank you all for listening throughout the year. And we seem to have gained a few more friends along the way. So we welcome you. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, all of that sort of stuff. If things happen, we may, we'll come back when things happen. We may do some other stuff as well. But for the most part, this is kind of a wrap-up show.
Yeah, that's a fair summary.
Yeah. We miss Tyler. We miss Devin. But Devin was on with me on a couple days ago. So, but we do miss Tyler. Yeah. But how do we follow everyone?
I am Bearded Canuck 03 on the X app.
You can find me at Schneids on most of the social media sites.
Tyler TNOBLE, Devin Gordhouse 09. He doesn't post a lot. He's very busy setting up his apt advantage in Ontario, but he will be our Peterborough Pete's OHL insider next year, talking about Flames and Canucks prospects that we need to keep an eye on. And I am KEVOLE on most social medias. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We don't talk to you in the summer. Have a great summer, but we will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now. Oops. Let's try this again. Bye for now. Oh, is it?